the impact of the colleges, both in America and in the UK. I mean, the irony is that the UAE has stopped funding and sending their students to Britain because they fear they're going to be radicalized on college campuses, which really says it all. Like, fewer Arab students will be seen at British colleges now because their Arab leaders want to protect their own country from radicalized youth that will destroy their country when they come back home. So I don't know how many Muslims in general go to college, but now it's a place of radicalization. So left-wing values and pro-Gaza values, and they don't get the facts. They just get their feelings stimulated and indoctrinated. And I think that is part of the problem in most of the countries now that we see that are having difficulties with their Muslim population. And as you said, there are many moderates, just like in Israel. We have over 2 million Arabs living with us, and most of them just want normal, decent lives, and they want to provide for their families. And they may have their beliefs, but they're not actively involved in them. And they get along with everyone, and they're not problematic. But the radicalized group is undermining all of Judeo-Christian values, and they're very loud about it. They make a lot of noise. And
it's not just the UAE, it's Bahrain as well, and Saudi Arabia also stopping their students coming to the UK because they will get radicalized on campus, which is a great shame. And it has become very, very difficult for many, many years now. It's just being highlighted in the media, but it's been very difficult for Jewish students in the last few years. And it's probably going to get worse. And it's difficult because now some Jewish students are saying, is there a way around this? Can we do it online, perhaps? Can we bypass actually not going onto campus? But it's not just in the UK. It's across Europe. And of course, it's certainly across the United States of America. This is a phenomenon which is taking over. And the same things which we're talking about here in the UK, again, it's across Europe and it's across the United States. This is just the change in the political atmosphere. In some cases, the media has not helped it by perhaps passing on inaccurate information and not getting both sides of the argument. Of course, the very famous example of this is in the early part of the Gaza war, towards the end of 2023 or the beginning of 24. Of course, that very famous hit on the hospital where I think it was the Al-Shifa hospital where 500 people were killed. And that statement was taken out immediately. And of course, it turned out that it didn't hit the hospital. It actually hit the car park. Maybe 25 people were killed. And it wasn't an Israeli rocket. It was actually the Islamic Jihad rocket. And you could actually see it. Even Al Jazeera had a live camera there. You could see it went straight up and went down. But they still insisted, no, we verified it. It was definitely the Israelis. That's Al Jazeera for you. But you could see it.
And not just Al Jazeera, it was also the BBC, I think, didn't they? And I don't think the BBC even changed and corrected the facts maybe for many months or even a year or so. They stood on it for a long time.
So you're referring to the veteran correspondent Jeremy Bowen, who I bumped into a couple of times in Jerusalem and in Tel Aviv. Jeremy Bowen is famous because he wasn't in Gaza, but he's since said, the reason why I won't apologize for saying that it was an Israeli rocket that killed 500 people is because I looked at the data. I looked at the evidence. I had the data in front of me. It was right in front of me. I looked very, very carefully at it. And it looked to me that the building was completely flattened. And they said, fine, but you got it wrong. Why don't you apologize? He said, I've no reason to apologize. That's what it looked like. And I did what I said, what I thought was right. I didn't lie. I thought was right. But you got it wrong. And he said, but no, I don't need to apologize. And that is the problem, because as you know, when something goes out, it goes all over the world. And when a newspaper recognizes that they've got it wrong, there's an apology, but it's on page 24 in a tiny little box.
If
which
they
is not going to see anyone.
If they correct it because it doesn't fit their narrative. So they have to kind of come this way and that way and say, oh, it wasn't exactly like that. It was sort of right the way we initially said it, if you look at it from this perspective or that angle. But they have a very difficult time backing down because they refuse to alter anything that doesn't fit their narrative.
That there's a lot of young people now trying to get into journalism and have got into journalism. They've got a degree, and therefore it's enabled them to get that job at that newspaper. Maybe it's starting off with a local newspaper, which is how it traditionally happened, and then you move into one of the nationals, and you're writing with your pre-arranged ideas
Right.
or pre-understanding of what the situation is, for example, in the Middle East, and that you have to say that Israel is an occupying colonial
Right.
power that has really suppressed Palestinians. So you're writing, that's your starting point, as
Right.
opposed to trying to understand a little bit more about the conflicts and understanding, for example, how Israel came into being by United Nations General Assembly vote in 1947. I mean, you
Right.
still hear there are still young journalists working on prominent newspapers that actually feel that the Jews just suddenly ended up there in 1948. They were welcomed by the Palestinians who
Right.
clothed them, who fed
Exactly.
them, and then they turned against them.
Yeah.
And they don't seem to want to go before 1948 to look at the history, and that's a shame
Well,
because
because
you
they didn't exist before. The Palestinians were a product of the 60s, not of the 40s. So why would they want to go back before those dates? There's no photographs, there's no evidence, there's no nothing. So they can't afford to go back before that point. That I think even in the college campuses, the students are made to feel like they're bigoted and racist if they don't hold by the party line, that they are the humanitarians, not the right wings or the Judeo-Christian values. That's not humane anymore. The humane are the ones who are for Gaza. And if you deviate from that path, then you are an outcast, basically, as the Jews now are finding themselves on college campuses. They are absolutely outcasts. And I don't see that changing.
Well, on the point of the newspapers, I mean, I do recall back in the 80s as well, although, but I seem to remember back in the UK in the 1980s, the programs This Week and Panorama, which is still going today, Panorama, the BBC,
Right.
which is looks at features and does background and investigation, etc. They
That's
were
right.
always very, very, very
Yeah.
critical of Israel, even
Yeah,
back then. Today,
yes,
of course, it's
right.
much more so because now it's ingrained in them that Israel is the bad guy. And it's interesting from a colonial point of view. You know, somebody said, "Oh, you're colonial person. You are Jewish person, Israel, colonial. Are you British?" Yeah, I'm British. You're British and you're calling me a colonial person? Really? Are you sure? That doesn't make sense.
So ironic, right?
I mean, if you look at it, most people can't even find the state of Israel on the map because it's just literally a dot. And if you find it, you have to zoom into it 17 times.
Right.
And then to find out what the name of that country is. And then the name of the country doesn't even fit in that bit
Into
that you
the
zoomed
bit. That's
into
right.
17
That's right.
times. And
Right.
so that's clearly not the definition of colonial power.
Right.
And yet Arabs came originally from Arabia and massive, great big land. And of course, then you had the Gulf states as well. And then they moved into Egypt and Iraq. And I mean, Egypt, Lebanon were Christian countries originally.
That's right.
And then, of course, Northern Africa was once part of Africa as such. That Northern Africa is still part of Africa, but you've got Arab states, as in Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, Libya, all of these places where very, very, very large Jewish communities came from, but were all kicked out with nothing except the clothes on their backs. And some of them were very, very wealthy and they had nothing. But again, people don't know about this. I'm not saying you should not feel sympathy for those Palestinians who are either getting it. Some people describe it as getting it hard from Israel, getting it hard from the Palestinians and the Palestinian leadership and Hamas and Fatah and Islamic Jihad and the Palestinian Resistance Committee, which of course is the third largest terrorist group inside of Gaza itself. But at least look at the bigger picture and try and understand the bigger picture.